Hello, everyone, and welcome again to Chamber Chat. My name is Carol Guest. I am the board chair for the Greater Houston Black Chamber of Commerce, and we welcome you to another edition of Chamber Chat. We seek to bring information you can use during this COVID-19 pandemic and beyond. And today, I am very, very happy to introduce our Harris County Clerk, Attorney Chris Hollins. Hello, Mr. Hollins. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Carol, and thank you so much for having me on Chamber Chat. I'm excited to be here.
Well, we are excited to have you, and I'm going to tell our audience a little bit about you. So first of all, everyone, you'll be happy to know that Mr. Hollins is a native Houstonian. He is a fourth generation Houstonian. As I mentioned, he is an attorney. He had his own law practice called the Hollins Law Group, which he graciously stepped down to become our Harris County Clerk. He holds a Bachelor of Arts degree in political science with Phi Beta Kappa honors from Morehouse College. He's a very smart man. In addition, he also completed a joint program with Yale Law School and Harvard Business School, earning both his Juris Doctor and Master of Business Administration degrees. As I said, he's a very smart man. He's also been a dedicated community volunteer, having served with Big Brothers for over a decade. He has consistently maintained a high level of service as soon as he took office as our Harris County Clerk. We have a lot to be grateful for having Mr. Hollins at the helm, and we're going to learn a lot about what he's doing to make sure that your vote counts and that it's not suppressed and that you have quick, clean, and safe access to the polls. So we'll get into our discussion today and ask some of the questions that you all have been wondering about concerning the voting process. So Mr. Hollins, just to get started, we know that this year is hotly contested. You know, a lot of people want to vote. A lot of people want to make their voices heard through the voting process. And we can anticipate that there are going to be long lines at the voting polls. What are your suggestions as far as alternatives to going to the polls if someone doesn't feel safe enough to do that, or if they feel like the lines may be too long and their vote may not be counted?
Absolutely. Well, first of all, the safest way to vote is to vote by mail. And not all Texans, unfortunately, are eligible to vote by mail. But if you're 65 years of age or older, if you're traveling outside the county during the election period, if you happen to be in jail, but you're otherwise eligible to vote, or if you have a disability, then you are eligible to vote by mail. And disability can be thrown around and maybe confused a little bit. So let me explain what that means under Texas law. Under Texas law, you have a disability under the traditional understanding, but also if you're sick, if you're pregnant, or if you have a physical condition that creates a likelihood of injury to your health if you vote in person. And I know what you might be thinking during the time of COVID-19. Well, I think we all have a physical condition that might make us likely to get injured if we vote in person. Well, the Supreme Court spoke on that, the Supreme Court of Texas. And what they said was that lack of immunity to COVID-19 can be considered as a factor in your health decision, but it cannot be the only factor. And so if you're perfectly healthy, then you don't qualify. But there are a number of other conditions that people could have, many that are more common for Black folks, like hypertension and diabetes, that would make you eligible. And so if you are eligible, we encourage you to vote by mail. Go to harrisvotes.com/vote by mail to apply. And not only is that safer for you, and not only is it more convenient for you to vote from your kitchen table or from your sofa, but it's also safer and more convenient for everybody else in Harris County, because that's one less person that's going to be in front of them in line, and that's one less person who they might be exposed to during the time of this deadly virus. And so if you're eligible, I strongly encourage you to vote by mail. But if you're not, the next safest way to vote is to vote early. The early voting period this year is a record 3 weeks long. I wrote a letter to Governor Greg Abbott a few weeks ago, and I personally requested that he extend the early voting period to allow as many people to cast their votes in a more distant and spread out manner with shorter lines. And he rose to the occasion and he extended that voting period. And so it starts on October 13th and extends all the way through October 30th, 7 days a week. And so you have that many options to vote early and to stay safe. And we're going to also have a record number of voting centers this fall. So during that early voting period that I just described, we're going to have a record number, 120 early voting locations across Harris County. That's more than double the previous record, which we just set in July. And on election day, we're going to have more than 800 voting locations. And so there will be many ways for you to cast that vote. But if you want to do it the safest way, then vote by mail. And if you want to do it the next safest way, then vote early.
Okay, so we have our mandate. And those of us who are ineligible, don't try to get a mail-in ballot. If you're 45, it's not gonna happen. So don't try it.
But if you're 45 with diabetes, if you're 45 with asthma, then you are eligible. And okay. In fact, one thing I should mention is that many people do have questions around this health thing. Well, how do I know if my condition counts? Well, what we did was we launched what's called the Safe Elections Medical Advisory Committee. And that's a committee of doctors, of medical professionals, and of public health experts that are based here in Harris County, who are going to provide you with their professional judgment. And so just a week from today, we're expecting their report to tell Harris County residents exactly which physical conditions are going to meet this threshold, and that guidance is going to be based on their background. These are storied professionals, but also from sources like the CDC, which are very well respected. And so we look forward to hearing from them, and you should certainly rely on their guidance. But ultimately, this is about your own decisions, particularly when it comes to your health. And so if you apply for a mail ballot and you fill that application out properly, my office does not have the ability or the authority to question your judgment, particularly about your health status. And so if you fill that application out properly, we're going to send you a mail ballot.
Okay, so everyone who is interested in doing a mail-in ballot, just make sure you follow the instructions.
Absolutely.
And go ahead and get it in on time. And when is the deadline for sending in mail-in ballots?
Yep. So the deadline to register to vote, I'll just start from the beginning. The deadline to register to vote is October 5th. And the deadline to apply for a mail ballot is October 23rd. But don't wait for those deadlines. You can register today and you can apply to vote by mail today. And if you have a mail ballot, you need to either get that back to us by election day, or it needs to be postmarked by election day and get back to us by the following day. But again, don't wait for those deadlines. We're going to get you that mail ballot. If you apply today, you will receive your mail ballot in September. You will have more than a month to get that back to us. And so don't wait until that last week. We want you to vote early too. When it comes out of the mail, complete it that day and get it back in the mail to us. Or you can physically drop your mail ballot back to us at any of our county clerk locations across Harris County. We have 11 offices, soon to be 12, and we're looking to potentially even expand that further. But if you're not comfortable with the mail, or if you happen to wait too long, because I know sometimes our people can wait a little bit too long to do some things, get that, you can bring it back to us in person at any of our locations. You will need your photo ID if you're going to drop it back off to us in person.
Okay, and as we're visiting with Mr. Hollins today, today is August 18th, and so next week, the 25th, there will be the listing of the medical conditions. Is that correct?
I believe the 26th, but next week.
26th. Okay, and as soon as you get your mail-in ballots, please send them in so that you'll have more than enough time to vote and to make sure that your request is in the system. So please send it back as soon as you can. Okay, now where can people go to learn about where the ballot drop-off locations are?
Yes. So as I mentioned, you can drop off your voted ballots at any one of our locations across Harris County during regular business hours. And you simply need to Google, Harris County Clerk locations, and you'll get a full listing of our locations. We have one in Chimney Rock, we have one in Baytown, we have them on the north side and on the south side. And so go to that website and you can see our 11 locations there.
Okay. And as far, you mentioned early voting earlier, and you said that it's been extended a full 3 weeks. Can you give us those dates?
Yes. So again, early voting starts on October 13th. That's a Tuesday. It's the day after Columbus Day. And that continues all the way through October 30th, which is a Friday. Okay. And of course, Election Day is on Tuesday, November 3rd.
And we'll have those dates posted on our Facebook page, our social media pages, so that you can make reference to those and stay in the know about early voting. There are going to be a lot of people at the polls. A big turnout is anticipated. Do you need any volunteers? How can people get involved if they want to get involved in helping?
That's a fantastic question. And the short answer is yes. I mentioned that we're going to have a record number of voting centers across Harris County. So because of that, we're going to need a record number of election workers, Carol. We're going to need at least 8,000, potentially as many as 12,000. And this is paid work, people. And so, $17 an hour. And so especially during this time of economic uncertainty, for folks who want to do a civic duty and potentially get, a couple of paychecks and pay a few extra bills, you can go to harrisvotes.com/election workers to apply. And you'll have two options, which when we get back with you, we'll ask you your preference. But you can work on just Election Day, that one Tuesday, and it's going to be a long, it's going to be a long day. Polls are open from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. and you have to get there well before the polls open, and then you have to close them down when the voters are gone. Or you can work with us for the entire early voting period, and that's a 3-week period, October 13th through the 30th. And so I encourage those who want to do their duty, but who also wouldn't mind getting paid, to go to harrisvotes.com/election workers to apply.
All right, so that sounds like, a great opportunity for anybody who wants to get involved in this historic process, this historic election, because it really will be a historic election. Are students able to get involved, high school students that may want to participate? Are they eligible to get volunteer hours? I know that some school districts require that, and I don't know if during this pandemic they're sticking to that. But in case they do want to participate, are high school students allowed to participate?
That's a great question. And so for our normal clerk program, you have to be a registered voter in Harris County. But we have a special high school clerk program for those who are 16 years old and 17 years old who want to get involved. And that's also paid work for those high school students. And it's important to note that Texas state law allows for high school students to have 2 days of excused absences to work on elections. And so not only can that student, get a paycheck, not only can they do their civic duty, but we'll also offer them those hours, and we'll write them a letter of recommendation for their schools, for their college applications, or even for their next job.
That sounds like a winner. If I had a child, I believe my child would be volunteering because that's great. I mean, the students really would need that type of backing for when they look to apply to college, look to apply for other jobs. So it's good to know that the Harris County Clerk's office is concerned about our students' future in that way.
Absolutely. And they provide a real service. I'll tell you, Carol, you know, the average age of our election judges and clerks is on the older side. And so now that we're introducing iPads and paperless this and new technology that, our high school clerks help us go a long way towards making sure that our voting centers are operating properly and efficiently. And so we really appreciate them. It's a great program.
Hmm. And speaking of that, there's some trepidation, surrounding COVID-19. You know, um, the high school clerk program sounds like a great program. The entire volunteer program sounds really great. What assurances could you give parents that are interested in having their kids participate, or have kids that are interested and may ask their parents about participating? Can you talk about that and talk about the COVID-19 measures you have in place for the polling places?
Absolutely. The one thing I'll say is that our voting centers will certainly be safer than schools. In fact, we take pride in them being safer than grocery stores that I know many of us go to during this time. And so, not just for our high school workers, but for every election worker and every voter, let me tell you the safety measures that we have in place. So, the first thing you'll see when you walk up to a voting center is the bright red X's that are marking out, 6 feet of distance as folks wait in line, making sure that we're following social distancing practices. The next thing you'll see is a buzzer near the curb that allows folks who are elderly or disabled or have a condition that makes it so that they don't want to go inside the voting center. You can vote from outside. You press that buzzer and one of our clerks will bring you a voting station at your car. And we're excited about that. But once you walk in physically, if you don't have a mask, you'll be offered a mask free of charge from our greeter. And then you'll notice that all of our staff has full PPE on, masks, face shields, potentially gloves and other things. You'll be given hand sanitizer before you enter the voting room. And of course, our staff is sanitizing their hands on a regular basis throughout the day. And then when you go to check in, you'll be separated from that election clerk by plexiglass. And instead of handing them your ID, we've created a process where you can have your ID checked without them physically touching it to further reduce any kind of contamination. And then we give you a finger cover and a sanitizing wipe. And so that finger cover that you have, you can use that to utilize the election machines without physically touching them. But just for your own comfort and your safety, you can use that sanitizing wipe to wipe down any surface, any high touch surface or voting machine, and even your hands as you're then leaving the voting booth. And so this is a very safe process. Our medical advisory committee that I just mentioned to you, in addition to giving us advice about mail-in voting and who qualifies, they're also giving us advice about our safety measures and how to improve them even further from July. But we were very proud that we kept our voters safe during July, and that voters and election workers gave us great feedback and high marks for how safe that they felt during the voting experience.
Well, excellent. It's good to know that you're taking so many precautions to make sure that the voters are safe, especially when entering the polling places. Have you made any provisions for what happens outside of the polling place? For example, where people are standing in line waiting to vote?
Yes, and so the primary thing is 6 feet of distance between folks who are not in family units. It's already law that folks who are doing what's called electioneering cannot come within 100 feet of the voting center. And so, we'll make sure that the lines that we do have are snaked to stay within that 100 feet so that people can't be bothering you with flyers and kind of getting all in your personal space. But we're also discouraging electioneering across the board. And we know that there are important elections happening, but this is a very different time. And we want even our candidates and their campaigns to respect the safety and the well-being of others and of their own staffs. And so we're working to reduce anything like that. But we don't want that line to extend that long, right? And that's why we have a record number of voting centers. We also have 50% more voting machines across Harris County than we've ever had. And we're going to have a wait time tool. And so when you go to vote, you can go to harrisvotes.com/wait times and type in your address. And it'll show you the 20 closest polling sites to you. And not only will it show you that, but it'll show you if there's no line, if there's a short line, or if there's a long line. And so you can choose which one to go to, to one that has no line whatsoever and avoid that line altogether. And in July, we were proud that in 95% of situations, the line was 5 minutes or less across Harris County. And we want to try and keep it that way, but we need you to help us, right? I know that many people go to very popular, voting centers. I, for example, always try to vote at Wheeler Avenue whenever I can. But if I go to harrisvotes.com and I see that St. Mary's down the street has a shorter line, I'm going to go there. And I encourage you to do the same thing. But also, if you vote early, you're most likely going to see short lines across Harris County. And so utilize that early voting period.
That's excellent. That is excellent. Well, thank you for explaining so thoroughly what the outside experience will be like, because as far as voting is concerned, people tend to be pretty much concerned about being outside or standing in long lines, but it sounds like your office has left no stone unturned with regard to the entire process from top to bottom. So whether or not we're doing a mail-in ballot, whether or not we're going to show up in person, it sounds like all bases are covered and we will be safe in our voting process. Now, if anyone happens to have a problem during the while they're there, if their name is not found for some reason, how are problems being handled at the polls?
That's a great question. Look, it is our top priority, of course, to keep you safe during this time, but ultimately to protect and guarantee your right to vote. And so we don't want to turn anyone away from the polls. And so if you encounter any problems at the polls, you should first contact the presiding judge at that voting center. And then if you still have an issue, you should call our election division directly. And I'm going to give you that number. It's 713-755-6965. 713-755-6965. And we will focus specifically on your issue. We have staff on hand, we have lawyers on hand who are working just to make sure that you have the right to vote. And so if for some reason, because there sometimes are issues with records or ID or something else, but if you can't find your name in the system, some example like that, you can still vote and you can cast that vote provisionally. And if it's an ID issue, for example, there's a way to what's called cure that vote. And so you cast it provisionally to make sure your vote gets in the system. And then you would just need to bring your ID downtown to show it to us sometime within 6 days of the end of the election. And if you do that, then your vote is cured and your votes are counted. And so that's a rare occurrence, but it does happen. I remember in the 2012 presidential election, the 2004 presidential election, I had to vote provisionally because of an issue when I was there in Morehouse. And so it's rare, but it's common enough, and you can solve that issue if you make sure that you take the proper steps.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And along those lines, can you clarify what the voter ID rules are?
Absolutely. And so I'm going to read this to you so I don't get it wrong here. Let me see. So with the exception of a U.S. citizenship certificate, that ID must be current, or for voters who are aged 18 to 69, have expired no more than 4 years before being presented for qualification. If you don't have that photo ID, and that can be a driver's license, a state ID, a gun license, then you can fill out a declaration at the polls that describes what's called a reasonable impediment. And so for many of us, and I think the DMVs are opening up right now, but for many of us, we couldn't get IDs during the time of the July election. And so that's a reasonable impediment to showing your ID. And so you can request a form that you fill out, but also show something else like a bank statement or a paycheck or a utility bill. And in that case, the photo ID will be waived, that requirement. But in most cases, for most folks, you bring your driver's license or your government ID, and that's all you need.
Do you need the the photo ID and the voter registration card?
No, you do not. We do encourage folks to keep their voter registration cards just in case. I honestly don't know where mine is, but you just need your ID. If you show up with a driver's license or a state issue government ID, you're good to go.
Okay, so you heard it here. You heard it here. Show up with your photo ID, you're good to go. So, Mr. Hollins, we've heard some talk about the Office of Elections Administrator. Can you tell us a little bit about that office and how it may help to alleviate voter suppression and make sure that the voting process is fair and equitable?
Absolutely. So Texas, to be very clear, does not have a great history of protecting voter rights. In fact, it's quite the opposite. And because of that, you end up with a lot of weird things in our laws that we're still working to change. But one of those is that things related to voting are currently split between two offices in Harris County. You have the tax assessor's office where you register to vote, and then you have the county clerk's office that administers the election. And let me give you the history of the tax assessor's office. You might have heard of something called the poll tax during Jim Crow times, where particularly Black folks were turned away because they couldn't afford to pay this tax to vote. Now, of course, that was eliminated, but that vestige of that poll tax being so important to voter registration is still seen by having voter registration happen in the tax assessor's office. And that's something that we don't need that reminder, in this community. The second thing is that it's just pretty inefficient. I've tried to talk to you today about voter registration because I care and I think that people should know about it, but that's not even my office. And that's really, really strange. And it's really, really confusing to voters. They should be able to come and have a one-stop shop for all their voting and election-related needs. And that's what the election administrator is going to be. And then the second thing, from an efficiency standpoint, we were talking about provisional ballots and maybe your name not being in the system and so on and so forth. The reason that mistake can take place sometimes is because all the voter data is housed in the tax assessor's office, and then they had to transfer it over to our office and our systems for it to be processed for an election. That's really strange. Sometimes mistakes can take place, or an error or a late sin can happen or something of that nature, and then our records are outdated. Having an election administrator will eliminate all of those things. You'll have a one-stop shop for everything from voter registration all the way through the election. And that's really important in serving Harris County residents. The other thing is that the election administrator will not be elected. And so you're taking politics completely out of this issue. And voting, shouldn't be a political issue in itself. The right to vote and expanding the right to vote for all American citizens should be a basic part of our democracy and not a political issue. And so this election administrator will not be allowed to, be an officer in a state party. They won't be able to donate to campaigns that are political in nature. They won't be able to run for office themselves without resigning, and so on and so forth, to ensure that's an apolitical, nonpartisan office that's only focused on voting rights and expansion and administration. In addition to that, while that person won't be elected, they will be appointed by an elections commission that's made up of elected officials. And so the county clerk, the county judge, the tax assessor, and representatives from both of the major political parties will be on this elections commission that ultimately hires and could fire this elections administrator. But it professionalizes the office. It allows someone to come in who's a seasoned professional and not just someone who happened to win a campaign. And, you know, I know a little bit about politics, and I hold many of our elected officials in very high esteem, but I think we've also seen when the opposite has happened. And so this will be about hiring a professional to do a job versus somebody who just happened to run a good campaign or win for one reason or another. Yeah. And so we're looking forward to the establishment of that office. The first meeting of the Elections Commission, which I sit on, and will take place this Friday to get the hiring process started. And we're already starting to reach out to search firms who can help us with a nationwide search to find the best possible person who can come and do this job for the people of Harris County.
Mm-hmm. Well, we look forward to seeing who this person is. I think it's a great step in the right direction to try to centralize some of these functions so that the voting process can be even more smooth. So again, we appreciate your efforts. And as a final question, in 2016, it's reported that maybe roughly over 100 million people did not vote in the 2016 election. In your opinion, what needs to happen to get people out to vote?
So, I mean, the biggest thing, frankly, is awareness. But it's also, you know, I'm talking to the chamber, and so folks know what business processes are, right? And, you know, when you're selling your product, the first thing that you have to do is make people aware of it, right? And they need to be basically qualified to be able to use that product. So it starts at awareness. People know about voting, know its importance. For Black folks in particular, we need to be aware of all of the sacrifices that our ancestors and our predecessors made, particularly for us to have this right, and to think about utilizing this right purely out of respect for them, but also for the importance of having our voices heard and choosing the leadership that ultimately represents us from the local level all the way up to the White House. And so that awareness piece is big. But then there are different steps along the process, right? Registration, that's your ticket. You cannot vote without being registered. And so we need our partners and community organizations to be registering people to vote, to be encouraging their friends and family to register to vote. And then from there, it's about turnout. And how do we do that? It's just about sharing those messages. It's about making sure people know that it's easy. A lot of first-time voters, you know, may be intimidated by the process about voter ID. Are there going to be police there? Is it going to be safe? Will I be embarrassed if I don't know what I'm doing? And so that's why my office is creating so many videos and content to say, look, I'll walk you through the voting process myself so you can see how it's done. We'll make sure that you know where you can vote. We'll make sure that you know if you're eligible to vote by mail, so you can do that simple process from the comfort of your home. And we'll make sure that these polling locations are as accessible to you as possible, that they're in your neighborhood, that they're on your bus route, that they're near your place of business or your child's school, and maybe even in your child's school or your church. And so, you know, we're doing everything in our power to make this safe, but then also to communicate these messages to let people know, because of all the things that we're doing, they don't matter if the voters aren't aware that they're taking place and that they're in place for your safety, for your convenience, and ultimately to serve you and make the voting process easier for you. And so we're going to continue to share those messages, but we ask that you share those along with us, that you follow us at harrisvotes.com or at Harris Votes on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. If you want to receive those same voting messages with a dose of beautiful children, you can follow me personally and see fun pictures of my kids at CG Hollins. But ultimately, we need you to share those messages with the community, with your friends and family, your business networks, so that people understand the importance of voting, but also know how they can go out and cast their votes.
Mr. Chris Hollins, thank you so very much for visiting with us today and providing such wonderful, wonderful information. Um, this has been basically a class on how to vote in Harris County this coming November, and we really appreciate your time. So everyone, when you see Mr. Hollins out and about, please tell him thank you for all of the work that he and his office have done to make sure that our voting process is safe and that it's clear and that all of us get the right to exercise our vote and have our vote to be counted. So we're going to end our chamber chat for today, but I want to remind you, Mr. Hollins has given the information about how to stay in touch with the Harris County Clerk's office, and I want to invite you to stay in touch with the chamber. Please follow us on our social media, Greater Houston Black Chamber or Houston Black Chamber on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and also our website at ghbcc.com. That's ghbcc.com. We invite you to become a member. You get the opportunity to meet in person people like Mr. Hollins as we advocate on your behalf as a Black business, which is part of our motto, access, advocacy, and awareness. We also have our Buy Black campaign where we hope and pray that you will support our member businesses at houstonbuyblack.com. We also have our Pinnacle Awards coming up on October 24th, so make sure that you save the date for that and continue to watch our social media and our website for updates regarding the Pinnacle Awards and all things Greater Houston Black Chamber. So Mr. Hollins, again, on behalf of the Chamber, I'd like to say thank you for spending time with us today. And everyone, be sure to tell everybody you know how great our Chamber is, the great information that we disperse to everyone, and stay tuned to everything that we do because we're here to serve you. Take care.